Tennessee spring scrimmage, QB notes and quotes from Auburn, Utah, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and more. News and notes from across college football after the Stinger. Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Good Morning College Football from CFP Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. I am Nicholas Ian Allen, taking a little bit of a break from shoveling snow to dig into some scrimmage notes from Tennessee, some quotes from quarterbacks and coaches from a wide range of programs across the country. We've got a lot of, just little quick hitter notes from, dozens of programs are either gearing up for their spring game coming up very soon, scrimmaging over the weekends, or kind of getting ready to turn the page a little bit once spring practice has wrapped up and turn their attention to the summer months and, of course, the fall ahead. But if this is your first time joining us, Campus to Canton is a college fantasy football company playing the C2C format of the game. CampusToCanton.com has a wide range of information content written, as well as tools and analytics, things like ADP for your college fantasy football drafts, your C2C drafts as well. We just like to dig in as much as we can and provide as much value as possible to our members, whether you join us for as little as $2.99 per month or all the way up to our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier packages that include a lot of the work that I work on, including our returning production database, which is available now to the members of those tiers. We talk about that a lot on this show. And then, of course, the big upcoming item on the to-do list that we are charging ahead toward. And our goal is still May 1st to get that published and available, our 2022 team profiles. So we talked about our SEC power rankings on Thursday's show, episode 31, and those power rankings come from those team profiles. So when we dig in and work through our individual player ratings for every player on the roster across FBS college football, incorporate our team profile, team performance ratings, our coach ratings, and those individual player ratings are used to build up all the way to our roster strength ratings for every team, and we project depth charts across the board, starters, backups, have recruiting information, bio information, schedules that include projected point spreads in 3 different models. We kind of take a different look at how our numbers stack up in 3 different ways: isolate talent in one, isolate on-field performance in one. So really looking forward to have that available. I think that, probably say this every year, but I think that our 2024 version is going to be the best yet. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you so much for supporting us. If you choose to do so as a member, but also we very much appreciate your support. If you subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, give this video a like. That really helps us a lot, keeps this show up and running and helping us to build momentum into the depths of the off season. But of course, as we look ahead to the 2024 season as well. And on that note, there are several teams who will be kicking off their spring games this weekend. SMU will play their spring finale tonight, Friday night. Clemson, Auburn, NC State, Southern Miss, UAB, New Mexico State, Tulsa, North Texas, UNLV, Navy, and Toledo all have their spring games scheduled for Saturday. That according to fbschedules.com. And Vanderbilt will have its spring finale on Monday. So we will have a lot of news, I'm sure, from those teams to dig through on our Monday show. But the perhaps most impactful event that happened since we last spoke was Tennessee had a scrimmage on Thursday night at Neyland Stadium. And there wasn't a ton, I guess there wasn't, full media availability during the scrimmage, but Josh Heupel met with reporters and went through a few things that occurred. And Patrick Brown of Go Vols 247, also Adam Sparks of Knoxville News were among those on hand that gave some insight, passed along some quotes from Heupel. And this was the second scrimmage of the spring for the Vols. It was under the lights at Neyland Stadium, lasted for nearly 2 hours, and was the 9th practice of the spring for Tennessee. So they are a little more than halfway through on their way to the orange and white game later this month. And according to those reporters, Josh Heupel, first of all, was very complimentary of the defense. We've talked a little bit about some of the injuries that have that Tennessee's had to work through on the offensive line, and then also the defensive line. It's just shaping up to be a major strength of that team. So not surprisingly, perhaps the defensive line really has had the upper hand this spring, it sounds like, and the defense performed quite well in the practice. Quoting Heupel here, defensively, I thought they started extremely fast, violent, disruptive, got off the field on third downs, did a great job. Offensively, settled in on the second half of the scrimmage, so a lot of good work there for just being over the midpoint of spring ball. We've been keeping a close look on, trying to keep our eyes out for information on that wide receiver group. Heupel said when being asked about, being more athletic at the wide receiver position this year, he said, quote, "Yeah, some guys made some plays. Some of the new guys, Brazzell," talking about Chris Brazzell II, the transfer from Tulane, "made some really nice plays today. Mike Matthews made some plays down the football field. Dante Thornton made some plays, continues to grow." Heupel was asked specifically about Thornton, who was a personal favorite of mine. Going into last year, I was very heavily invested in Dante Thornton in college fantasy football drafts and things like that. He dealt with some injuries, but I still, he's a big target, 6'5", very, very fast, and was impressed with some of the things that I saw in a small sample at Oregon. This year, there definitely not very much buzz about Thornton, but Heupel, it sounds like, perhaps still, liking what he's seeing. Finishing the quote here, he said, "Dante, I think, last year with where we were at with guys that we had, started him in the slot. He got work on the outside. He was so limited in spring ball and training camp, just got banged up. He missed a lot of practices and missed opportunities to grow within what we're doing. We moved him outside in the middle part of last year, was playing his best football, got dinged up. It's a guy that has great trust in the coaching staff, understands just how to operate and function within our offense, and understands coverages in a better way. It's just continuing to grow out there. Really like what he's done." So maybe a little bit of a post-hype sleeper, perhaps. Probably still want to be cautious, but this time last year, Thornton was really starting to pick up some buzz, but was limited by injury. There's always a little bit of a transition period for an incoming transfer. We have to keep that in mind as well. But sounds like he is having a good spring and consistently on the field and making some growth there. So good to know. Of course, most folks, when it comes to Tennessee, are interested to hear how new quarterback Nico Iamaleava is doing. Josh Heupel provided some insight to that as well. Said, quote, "Yeah, just in general, I thought he operated and functioned extremely well tonight and made some plays. Did that with his arm, made plays with his feet too. We didn't start super fast on the offensive side of the football, had some opportunities, just didn't get points out of it. I just thought his competitive composure was really big, and that's kind of his demeanor in general. He's just continuing to grow in that leadership role too. So really pleased with what he's done. That's tonight, and that's just through the first part of spring ball. One item of note that we've touched on in previous episodes of Good Morning College Football is the injury to running back Cam Seldon. Where does that leave Tennessee as they look ahead to the season? Will they look to add some depth through the transfer portal when that window opens a little bit later this month? But according to Heupel, Deshaun Bishop, who was injured last year and of course, lower on the depth chart because running back was a particularly deep position for the Vols last season. He's getting an opportunity now to show what he can do, and it sounds like impressed during the scrimmage. Quoting Heupel here, he said, "The running backs tonight, you brought up Deshaun Bishop. I thought he ran extremely well tonight. Without watching the film, I'd say probably the best football that he's played this spring. He's a guy coming back off injury that is getting more comfortable as he's gone through the spring. So really liked what he did." Khalifa Keith, walk-on running back, had a good night too. So, not any earth-shattering news, but coming out of Tennessee, kind of good to hear some positive notes on players working back who were limited by injury last season, perhaps taking a little bit of an advantage of some extra opportunities due to some other players who are limited by injury this spring, but plenty to go yet with another half of spring practice still for the Vols. Some quarterback notes and quotes from a variety of places. We mentioned Peyton Thorne yesterday at Auburn, and Nathan King of Auburn Undercover gave a little bit more detail, had some quotes from Thorne himself about why it seems that he has made a bit of a jump this spring, really does seem to have kind of taken control of that number one quarterback spot on the depth chart. Seems now to be a heavy favorite, the way I sort of read things and understand it. And part of that, it sounds like Thorne is got his level of confidence at perhaps an all-time high, or he compared it to where he was in 2021 at Michigan State when the Spartans, of course, had such a great season. But it sounds like, according to King and as he outlined what Thorne said this week, part of that more, him being more comfortable was a change that head coach Hugh Freeze and new offensive coordinator Derek Nix made to the way that Auburn is approaching its RPOs, run pass option plays, this spring. So on Thursday, Thorne, according to King, made mention of some tweaks that the coaching staff and the quarterback put in place a couple of weeks ago. And according to Thorne, quoting the piece here, he says, "Coach Freeze made a change and did what he's most comfortable with. And what he really wants is what I'm most comfortable with as well. So I was super happy to see that. Since the day, I feel like the RPO system has been really efficient, and I've been really excited about it. I feel very comfortable with whatever RPO is called right now." He also continued later in the piece, said, quote, "It's really simple. It makes things easy. There's no indecisiveness. I was talking to my dad on the phone a couple of weeks back. These last couple of weeks, my confidence is really rising. I feel the best I've felt, honestly, since 2021 right now. I feel extremely confident." So, didn't dig into the mechanics or too much into the details. As always, players, coaches try to keep some things close to the vest, but sounds like a positive change in a particular type of play, those RPOs, which are common, of course, across college football, but in Hugh Freeze's offense as well at Auburn. And I do believe Freeze is the play caller, even with Nix as the new offensive coordinator. Have to go back and check that, but I believe that was my understanding. But regardless, it sounds like Peyton Thorne really getting comfortable, confident, And one of the changes in the way that they approach those RPOs is a part of that. At Utah, Joe Coles of Deseret News passed along some news earlier this week that linebacker Levani Damuni, who was a starter technically, with the way we calculate it at CFP Winning Edge, is if you start 51% of games for a team, they get bold text in our team profiles, depth chart projections, and things of those notes. But unfortunately, Damani suffered a lower leg injury that will keep him off the field for the majority of the 2024 season. Head coach Kyle Whittingham noted after practice on Tuesday that Damani's injury, as of right now, is the only one that will impact the 2024 season. Quoting here from the piece, he said, "We've had some guys that have missed chunks of practice here and there and a couple of surgeries. Nothing that we hope is going to impact the fall, with one exception. Levani Damuni had a lower leg injury, so that's something that is going to be impactful." Josh Furlong of KSL.com passed along some quotes from Whittingham as well this week that referenced Cam Rising and his improvement after missing all of the 2023 season due to injury. Quoting here, he says, his arm is coming back. When you have an injury like he had, it affects your confidence and the ability to really step into your throw and rip through it. His arm strength is getting better. He's shaken pretty much all the rust off. He was a little rusty at the beginning, but through 10 practices, he's really polished up his game. One of the things I've read most about this spring when it comes to Utah is the quarterback position, but not Rising. He is firmly entrenched. Sounds like close to 100%. That day one of spring practice, the video that the official Utah Twitter account posted was Rising running around looking good, but sounds like still had to knock off a little rust, especially as far as his arm goes. But according to his head coach, that's in good shape. But most of the discussion has been about the number 2 battle on the depth chart. Brendan Rose coming back from injury. He was also hurt last year. Part of the reason why Utah was just going through so many quarterbacks. But newcomer, true freshman, Isaac Wilson, familiar name. According to Whittingham, those two are in a, quote, dead heat for that backup spot behind Rising. At North Carolina, inside Carolina, Ben Sherman had a post that included some notes from Jason Staples, who's X and O's expert there, has a coaching background where they discuss the 5 early takeaways from spring practice. Staples, in that mix, those 5 takeaways, said he believed that the offensive line will be improved in 2024. Said the back 7 on defense projects to take a step forward. The season rides on the defensive line, and then emphasizing energy on defense. So, offensive line area of importance. If you look at our team returning production database, you can see that there's some transition there, some transfers coming in, some players moving on. The defense at North Carolina has been a bit of an issue in recent years. That's putting it, fairly simply. But the other item that really caught my eye and sort of the depth that he provided there was, the quarterbacks are more than capable game managers. And of course, North Carolina has to replace Drake May. I did some work on the North Carolina team profile earlier this week and honestly was a little bit surprised at how high North Carolina ranked in our power rankings. Right now, with only about half of ACC teams done, but wouldn't expect the order to change too much. Right now, North Carolina is a top 5 team in the ACC and a clear top 25 team in our overall power rankings. They might end up in the top 20, depending on how things shake out from there. And losing Drake May is big. I mean, he was a quarterback who was at the highest levels of our individual player ratings at that position. And Max Johnson, stepping in, has a lot of experience, 23 starts in his career at LSU and Texas A&M combined, was a pretty highly rated recruit as well coming out of high school. So, on paper, Max Johnson, rates pretty well in the low 90s. So there's not as big of a drop off the way we calculate those roster strength ratings and that quarterback position strength rating as well when you go to Max Johnson. But, digging behind or deeper than our numbers are able to, Staples, noted, and I'm quoting here from the piece, Max Johnson throws a really pretty football. You look at him in drills and what he's doing against air. He's putting the ball right on the spot and spinning it like a pro. There's no doubt about his arm talent and the ability to put the ball into different spots. The first day when we saw him on 7-on-7, it was a bit of a mess. But that's the first day and with a bunch of rookie wide receivers. And this is something that caught my eye when going through those team profiles. I didn't quite realize how much turnover there was in the wide receiver group. And that also is something of note that Staples made here, that some of the most experienced players at that position are not on the field this spring. Continuing here from the piece, said everybody needs to remember that this spring, J.J. Jones, Gavin Blackwell, Kobe Paysour are not playing. So you have a bunch of guys who are first and second year players in the program. Continuing a little later, he says, with what they're bringing to the table in the passing game, I think they're going to be good enough to be able to supplement what they're doing in the running game. Continuing on a little later, he says, is it going to be Drake May? No, but it's going to be probably top half of the ACC, and I think they've got the pieces around them. And if they can be better on the offensive line, if they can keep their quarterback protected a little bit better up front this year with the guys that they've got, that's going to help. So North Carolina, a team that, for the first early days, I guess, of me sort of mentally moving on to 2024, and in part because Drake May is expected to be taken very early in the NFL draft later this month, I kind of expected that the Tar Heels would take a pretty big step back in our power rankings. So they weren't top of mind for me. Didn't really expect them to be a top 25 type team. Didn't really expect them to be maybe in the mix as an ACC title contender. And perhaps maybe we're a little too high on them the way the numbers are shaking out. But this is another team that right now, they look like a top 20 team in overall roster strength. They could potentially be a top 10 team in offensive roster strength, assuming that the wide receivers who are limited this spring get back and fully healthy. If that offensive line comes together, which is, of course, a question mark. Only one full-time starter is back on the offensive line. But pretty interesting team, and one that I think is, especially if the defense takes a step forward under Jeff Collins, which is a question mark. But there's a lot more experience coming back on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the front seven. The defensive line grades out pretty well the way that we calculate it. So I don't know. North Carolina, perhaps a little bit more of an interesting team than I expected before really digging into their team profile and updating their page for 2024. At Wisconsin, a couple of different sites provided some updates from the first few practices for the Badgers. At Bucky's fifth quarter, Rohan Chakravarti mentioned that running back Chez Mellusi remained the top running back and looks near, if not at 100% healthy, which, in our earliest episodes of Good Morning College Football, we talked a little bit about Chez Mellusi, who, of course, suffered an ugly lower body injury last season. Head coach Luke Fickell said that Mellusi might not practice. Was sort of vague about it, but made it sound like, hey, don't really expect to see too much out of him. And in the very earliest days of spring practice, Mellusi is on the field, looks close to 100%, and taking first team reps. There, of course, is a newcomer, several newcomers if you include freshmen, but Oklahoma transfer Tyree Walker was expected to come in, potentially push Malusi for starting reps, especially if Malusi wasn't going to be back and fully healthy quickly. But sounds like right now the Badgers have done some work with some two-back sets, similar to what they did when Braylon Allen and Malusi was healthy early last season. So keep an eye out for that this fall as well. But according to the piece, Walker looked explosive. Certainly a downhill runner, should be a strong complement to Malusi at the top of the depth chart. But we're mostly talking quarterbacks here, and there was a slightly unexpected quarterback note that Chakravarti passed along, as did Jesse Temple of The Athletic. Apparently it was a little bit of an up and down day for the quarterback position, but Tyler Van Dyke, the transfer from Miami, somewhat similar to last year when Tanner Mordecai showed up at Wisconsin. The expectation was, hey, he's going to be the starter, right? And that is how it seemed to work once he arrived on campus. Basically took all those number one reps. I was under the assumption that Van Dyke would receive similar treatment, but apparently Wisconsin approaching it a little bit different. Braden Locke, who was the backup last year at Wisconsin, did some good things, got some buzz in fall camp. He was splitting first team reps, according to reporters. So something to keep an eye on as we move a little bit forward. Do I necessarily expect Locke to be a legitimate threat to start week one, beat Tyler Van Dyke out for this job? Perhaps not. But it's something to keep an eye on because he does have a little bit of an advantage with his familiarity now with the Wisconsin offense. Temple passed along some quotes from Luke Fickell talking here about Tyler Van Dyke. Quote, "I want to see him kind of continue to come out of his shell, but he's in a battle as well. So I think for him, learning the offense and repping and working with a guy that's been in the offense, that knows it like the back of his hand, like Braden, I think that puts a little bit more pressure on him. But I think he's done a great job. I think we're going to continue to see him kind of come out of his shell, and not just as a football player, but as a leader as well." That, sounds like maybe it's just taken a little extra time for Van Dyke to get acclimated, perhaps. Don't want to read too much into just one quote. Don't want to read too much into two players both taking first team reps on the second day of spring practice. But perhaps it's not quite as clear cut as we anticipated, that Tyler Van Dyke was just going to come in and just quickly be named the starter at Wisconsin. Still expect him to come out ahead in this battle eventually, but Braden Locke is going to push him, it sounds like. Also, Jesse Temple gave a quote from Fickell about Malusi. Said, quote, "I thought maybe we would hold him in a lot of situations, but I don't know that that's going to be the best thing for Ches, and I don't know if it's the best thing for us, and that's not what Ches wants." So taking a little bit of Malusi's thoughts on it into consideration. If he feels like he's healthy and ready to go, it sounds like Luke Fickell and Wisconsin are going to give him some work this spring. So good notes there. A few others, and we'll try to move relatively quickly through these. A few former Pac-12 teams are really hitting their stride in spring practice. Washington opening up earlier this week. Scott Eklund of Dogman was on hand and noted that the Huskies had their first spring practice under new head coach Jed Fish Wednesday evening. Quarterback Will Rogers, who transferred in from Mississippi State when Kalen DeBoer was still the head coach in Seattle, was unclear whether or not he would stick around, but did and has taken so far all the first team reps at quarterback. According to Eklund, Rogers looked unfazed and in control of things. He took all of the first team reps, and freshmen Damon Williams and DeMarcus Davis were behind Rogers in the quarterback pecking order. The top trio of wide receivers working with Rogers, according to Eklund, were Giles Jackson, Denzel Boston, and redshirt freshman Rashid Williams. The first team offensive line, which is an area that's concerning for me, looking at how that team profile looks on paper at that position, how that projected depth chart looks. It's a little bit scary, quite honestly. Washington's offensive line right now rates out in the low 90s. Might end up triple digits depending on how other teams shake out, just based on our individual player ratings. But one item that caught my eye in the piece from Eklund was true freshman Paki Finau was the first teamer at left guard. So there are definitely some talented players available for Washington. Not very many of them are experienced. So we'll see if a true freshman is able to emerge as a starter and what that might mean for that unit. Eklund also passed along the note that at running back, Jonah Coleman, he said, looks like an absolute tank, listed at 5'9", 225, and his legs are like tree trunks. He ran the ball well, but he said the player that really stood out at the position was Tybo Rogers, who was backup part-time contributor for Washington last season. At Oregon, long time hated rival for Washington, James Crepea of the Oregonian and Oregon Live noted earlier this week, and we touched on this as something prior to Oregon taking a 2-week break after their first couple of practices, that they might be able to add some of those incoming transfers when things ramp back up. And according to Crepea, Evan Stewart, the transfer from Texas A&M, as well as Jabbar Muhammad, who transferred from Washington of all places, as well as offensive lineman Trent Ferguson and kicker Gage Hirsch, were on the field for the Ducks. All four were expected to join the team later this spring, and good to note there that especially with Stewart and Muhammad, who are expected to be among the best at their positions for Washington this year. A former Oregon quarterback player, Ty Thompson, who we mentioned earlier in the spring, was limited by injury, had a late surgery that made it so he wasn't able to start the spring at Tulane. According to Jeff Duncan of the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com, Thompson practiced for the first time in full team drills earlier this week after recovering from a foot injury. He is, of course, competing with Kai Horton for the starting job. Horton got a little bit of a head start with Thompson sidelined early on, but back and healthy, it sounds like, enough to compete this spring, and hopefully this fall those two will have a full competition to see who's going to come out on top there. At Arizona State, a lot of updates from Sun Devil source this week. Chris Karpman had several write-ups, including 5 players that impressed in the third practice on Tuesday. That included Jake Smith, perhaps a little bit of a forgotten man, but is currently practicing, it sounds like, a lot with the first team receivers. Was deemed ineligible last year as a multi-year transfer. He called Troy O'Meara, who, like Smith, was a highly touted recruit, took a little bit of a winding road to Arizona State, but called O'Meara a freak show, and sounds like he is really impressed through the early days of spring practice for the Sun Devils. Raleek Brown, the former 5-star running back who converted to wide receiver at USC last year, didn't end up playing very much, took a redshirt year, and has since transferred to Arizona State. According to Cartman, Brown instantly became Arizona State's best quick Twitch offensive athlete the moment he stepped out on campus. Sounds like Brown is getting a fair amount of first-team reps this spring. A lot of players at that position, of course, but there were notes on injuries and Xavier Guillory, who missed the last 6 games of last year during the season with a foot injury, has taken some one-on-one reps, it sounds like, early this spring. Elijah Badger, the expected top receiver, senior standout, is running full speed, according to Cartman, but will be limited throughout the spring as he recovers from a back injury. So something to keep an eye on there. On Tuesday, Sam Leavitt was taking first-team reps at quarterback, DeCarlos Brooks at running back, Jordan Tyson, who it sounds like has had a really strong start to spring practice at ASU after missing last season, was a standout on a really poor Colorado offense in 2022, but missed the end of that season after suffering just really, really rough injury. And that, of course, held him out last year as well. But Tyson is back, repping with the number ones a lot and making plays. It sounds like there's a note about him a little bit later here as well. Caleb Black was taking some first-team reps at wide receiver also, and Bryce Pierre at tight end. On Wednesday, a little update to some of those, including Tyson scoring a touchdown and flipping into the end zone and throwing the ball in the air to punctuate the occasion. He said almost to announce that he's back, according to Cartman there. Leavitt again taking first-team reps at quarterback, Raleek Brown and Kyson Brown splitting the first-team reps at running back on Wednesday. Jake Smith, Derek Eusebio, and Melquan Stovall getting the first-team wide receiver reps that day, and Marqueston Douglas and Cameron Harpole at tight end. So it sounds like a lot of rotating in and out, ones and twos. Sounds like made a fantastic play during the red zone period, a diving catch on a fade route near the corner pylon over sophomore defensive back Javon Robinson, that according to Cartman. And then also finishing up with a note on Thursday, and this was not Cartman, Jake Seymour noted this, that the practice on Thursday was only the second fully padded practice for the Sun Devils this spring. And head coach Kenny Dillingham, on that note, now you're able to see a little bit more, live blocking. And Dillingham was impressed with what he saw from the offensive line, quoting here from the piece. Today, the O-line went out there, and with that hat, we ran the damn ball. It was quite evident. And defense, on the contrary, we've got to stop the damn run. I think that is what the challenge was. I didn't think the energy level was there from the defense, especially the front four, the box guys early. I think it showed up at the end of practice, but I don't think we had that same passion and energy we had in the prior practice. So we say it probably every episode. If not, we maybe should. Anytime you hear, okay, the offense is really showing out, the offensive line is looking great, that in spring means that the other end of it, the defense probably not looking so great, the defensive line. So not sure that we can read too much into it, that, the Arizona State offensive line is going to be excellent in, creating running room this season. Don't know yet. Also don't know that the defensive line is really going to struggle against the run, but always interesting to hear where those units are and how they're stacking up. At Boise State, Ron Counts of the Idaho Statesman had a little bit of a profile on Latrell Caples, the wide receiver, a little bit of a forgotten man. I noticed that in the Campus to Canton .com rankings, the CFF rankings are up on the site from a few of our contributors, as well as the ADP from the early months of the offseason. And Latrell Capels wasn't mentioned in either. And part of that, it's a pretty deep wide receiver group. There are some newcomers, Cam Camper, the former five-star transfer, Chris Marshall is there as well. But LaTroy Capels, due to injury, which cost him last season, perhaps a little bit of a forgotten guy, but he was the leading receiver for Boise State in 2022. And Counts, who interviewed him, gave some idea that Capel's not only back and healthy and practicing, something that of note, Cam Camper, who I learned in this piece, was childhood best friends, it sounds like, with Camper, with Capels in Texas. But Capel here says, quote, "I'm proving myself every day. It's a blessing getting out there with these guys and knocking the rust off. It's about proving to myself that I'm still the guy I was, and I can be even better." The Boise State passing offense struggled a little bit at times, and this is a run-first offense, and Ashton Jeanty, one of the best running backs in college football, has been one of the, I believe his ADP in CFF draft so far this year is as the number one overall player. Ollie Gordon of Oklahoma State in the mix there. Caden Salter, quarterback at Liberty, in the mix there. But Jeanty, more often than not that I've seen, has been the first overall pick. So, that's going to impact the ability for somebody like Capels to come in and put up big numbers as well. But Capels says that he thinks he's a little bit of the secret recipe to fix what was missing last season for the Broncos in the passing game. Said, quote, "I bring the energy, leadership, playmaking ability, and everything we need in that room. We were missing that last year. I'm going to bring intensity and everything we need in that room just so we can be successful." So again, Cam Camper in that room as well. Sounds like he is going to be limited, maybe miss the majority of spring practice, if not all of spring, according to Spencer Danielson in the piece. But that knee injury that Camper suffered in November last season, sounds like isn't expected to cause him any issue this fall. But Malachi Nelson, five-star quarterback, sounds like still a little bit of a work in progress as far as the passing game goes this year, but he's getting a lot of reps, especially with quarterback Maddox Madsen, who has been limited, suffered a season-ending injury last year. But good news there, according to Counts, is that Madsen is already moving around better than anyone expected. His knee, which he underwent surgery for in November, does limit him, but he's able to take part in some individual workouts and 7-on-7 sessions. But Nelson, for the most part, sounds like taking those number one throws. That included a big play, long touchdown on Tuesday where he and Capels connected. Also, wide receiver Austin Bolt made what was described as an acrobatic diving catch on a deep ball, and Marshall has managed to do some good work as well. Sounds like a couple of nice catches along the sideline, able to keep his feet in bounds. So interesting, sort of a lot of moving parts there at Boise State. New players coming in, old players returning from injury. Curious to see how it all shakes out. But that offense, I think, is really going to be fun to watch how it all comes together. A little bit murky as far as who's going to make the biggest CFF impact, especially in that receiving core. But that unit is shaping up to be, I think, probably one of the most best and most interesting Group of Five conference offenses in the country. So curious to see how that all shakes out. All right, a few other notes. Again, we'll try to move quickly, save a little time for Northern Illinois as our team of the day at the end. But this week, a couple of Indiana student newspapers, Daniel Flick of the Indiana Daily Student and Seth Tao of the Daily Hoosier, passed along some quotes from new head coach Kirk Cignetti that were interesting. Quarterbacks, of course, a major area of discussion just about anywhere, but at Indiana, Curtis Rourke, the transfer from Ohio, is expected to be the starter. And according to Cignetti, quote, he just looks like the last 2 practices he's been functioning, looking like a high-level quarterback. There was a lot of buzz for a younger quarterback early in spring practice. Tyler Cherry, true freshman. But, I wondered, and I sort of joked a little bit in the Campus Canton Slack, hey, is Cherry going to beat out Curtis Rourke? Because there were, a couple of those highlight videos tweeted out where he had some nice throws, was hearing a lot of buzz in the background, and Cignetti had some nice things to say as well. But this quote from the head coach kind of poured some cold water on any hope. Not that I was really thinking that Curtis Rourke's job was in trouble here. And of course, Taven Jackson is also still on campus and competing. But Cignetti said this week, according to Flick and Tao, quote, he's not ready. He does throw the ball to the right guy a lot. The arm strength and accuracy need to improve, but for a freshman to come in and find the open receiver, keep plugging along. He gets better every day. Have a great summer and fall, and let's see. But I think those first 3 words, he's not ready, probably tell us what we need to know, at least as far as week 1 goes. But Tyler Cherry is a name that I'm filing away for the future, certainly. And Kurt Cignetti's had a nice run of quarterback play, especially in the last couple of years at James Madison. So whoever ends up winning that job, Rourke, who's done some good things, of course, at the FBS level, seems like he's in a good position. Sounds like he's trimmed down. We mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. And so that's good to see, because he was definitely not 100% early last year. But how are the wide receivers working out? And one of my, one of my most intriguing, I guess, wide receivers. And I'm always interested when a player converts to receiver from another position, especially quarterback. And Donovan McCulley did some nice things, was the leading wideout at Indiana last year, 48 catches, 644 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's a big target. But it sounds like, Indiana, of course, brought in a bunch of transfers at wide receiver, and McCulley maybe not stacking up quite as well as expected. So another quote here from Cignetti: I see a couple of guys starting to really step up. Surratt, Miles Cross, Price has been good. Elijah Surratt, former James Madison wide receiver. Miles Cross, also a transfer in. And Miles Price from Texas Tech. Continuing here. Kashawn Williams, transfer from Wake Forest. When he's out there, sounds like he's dealing with a little bit of an injury. Cooper's made some nice plays, just a little more consistency. But here's the important piece. I think Donovan needs to pick it up a little bit, according to Cignetti. So sounds like McCulley, who, according to those reports, worked with the second team on the practice field on Tuesday, was notably absent from the list that Cignetti mentioned as guys who are stepping up. So something to note there. I think McCulley really does have a bright future. Was impressed with him at times last season as he continues to make wide receiver his full-time position and really grow in that new position after not having not played it very much in previous years. But sounds like right now some of the newcomers maybe are squeezing him out of that starting rotation a bit. Manny Navarro of The Athletic, who does, of course, a wonderful job covering Miami, wrote a very in-depth piece earlier this week that touched on nearly every position group, gave lots of detail on defense, quarterbacks, running backs. But one interesting little note that caught my eye impacts potentially that running back position, where Miami is expected to add a transfer once that window opens up, in part to replace what was lost with Henry Parrish entering the transfer portal earlier this spring. But there is a true freshman tight end, Elijah Lofton, who has been participating in spring practice as an early enrollee, taking snaps at a variety of positions, including tight end and H-back and running back. As Navarro noted here, listed at 6'4", 5'2" and 250 pounds, the former 4-star recruit from Las Vegas Bishop Gorman, could become Miami's version of Deebo Samuel this season, getting snaps at tight end, H-back, running back, and receiver. Lofton was quoted in the piece saying, "I'm comfortable," talking about anywhere on the offense. "Just have to line up and play ball. I'll do whatever I can to help the team be elite, be great." Mario Cristobal was also quoted here, said, "I personally think if he was a linebacker, he'd go over there and give everyone a run for their money. He exceeded expectations, and we've thrown a lot at him. We talked a lot about Ruben Bain and Francis Muigoa last year, true freshman who ended up starting for Miami. When you talk about Elijah, you feel a little bit the same way." So another player who was mentioned was C.J. Donaldson, who was listed as a tight end in recruiting services and then emerged as a starter at running back as a true freshman at West Virginia, was a major fantasy cheat code, having tight end eligibility and being a starting running back. I'm not sure. It sounds like Lofton is going to be, the starter when all is said and done at Miami. Of course, they've got a talented and deep room, though it is, there are some injury issues with Mark Fletcher, A.J. Allen, both missing some time this spring. Perhaps that's what led to Lofton getting a little bit longer look. But who knows? Will he get some goal line carries if he's a tight end? As far as eligibility goes, that's something certainly to note, I think. A few other quick quarterback notes, a couple of transfer notes as well here at the end before we go to NIU. At Virginia, Jackie Franciulli of Wahoo's 247 had some notes about the quarterback position on Wednesday when head coach Tony Elliott met with the media. Quote, Tony Muskett, talking about Tony Muskett, the starter last season. Tony was the starter, and he won the job. And Anthony Calandria, the true freshman, came in, did some good things, played well and did a good job, and that's where we're going to start. But we're not going to worry about that other than that's where we're starting. We're going to give them both equal amount of reps. Buried the lead a little bit there. Franciulli noted that those two were splitting reps with the first team, and Calandria actually took, if I understand correctly, those first opportunities there in practice. So according to Elliott here, quote, "So both of those guys have been running with the ones. Gives them an opportunity to go work with the top guys that we have on offense from an offensive line standpoint, backs and receivers, and they got a real great relationship. They're working well together, and it's the spring. Everybody is going to talk about that stuff, the competition. But where my focus is right now is both of them getting better. I outlined a couple of things for each one of them to focus on this spring and from an improvement standpoint, and that's where we're focused on. And we get into the bulk of our live stuff, then you'll have some more true evaluation of where we are. But so far, I've been pleased with both for their command of what we're doing." At Temple, we mentioned Temple a couple of times, and Owls Daily and Sean Pastor do a good job covering that program a little bit better than a lot of Group of Five teams. I should say a lot better than a lot of Group of Five teams get. And recent note here this week, Pastor said the quarterback battle remains wide open as Evan Simon, Forrest Brock, and Tyler Douglas have split reps in the first two scrimmages. A name that was absent from that list that I had missed this earlier, Cliff McDowell, the transfer coming in from Montana, left the program last weekend. So head coach Sean Drayton said, "We found out on Saturday morning." That's when he told us. We didn't know anything prior to that. Drayton also made some notes on, the quarterbacks said they're flashing. No one quarterback has put together a complete day yet, but there are flashes of these guys getting better. Sounds like Simon was the first to take reps in the last media viewing period, but Forrest Brock has been getting a lot of buzz as well. And then Tyler Douglas, still in the mix. So the perhaps most notable item there, though, is McDowell, who led Montana to the FCS national championship game, is not going to be a factor there. All right, very quickly at UCLA, Colin Schlee, former starting quarterback at Kent State, is going to be entering the transfer portal. Sounds like he is hoping to move back to the West Coast, closer to his home state of Maryland for personal reasons. So we'll keep an eye on that. Justice, who, of course, does great work for Campus to Canton and CFF and IDP, put it eloquently in the stack that, hey, ODU, just as an Old Dominion fan, is close to Maryland. But unfortunately, if Schlee were to end up at ODU, he won't be throwing to Amarion Granger, the wide receiver who came out this week that he is going to enter the transfer portal as well. A couple of coaching notes at Nevada. Good news that Matt Lubick, who was dealing with a cancer diagnosis, is able to be back and will be taking over full-time offensive coordinator duties for the Wolfpack. So great news there. At Ohio, the Bobcats have an opening at defensive coordinator because Spence Nowitzki has moved on to Memphis to replace Lou Esposito, who resigned to become the defensive line coach at Michigan earlier this week. And a note, a little bit of a surprise, Dave Duggan, the defensive coordinator at Kent State, is actually left to become a high school head coach at a private school in Jackson, Mississippi. So even mid-spring, late spring for some teams, we're still seeing coordinator changes at the FBS level. Finally, wrapping up here today with Northern Illinois, which gets good coverage from Shaw Local, including Joel Benitz, who was on hand on Monday for a press conference ahead of the first spring practice with head coach Thomas Hammock, who mentioned that there's 6 quarterbacks on the roster, that the competition is wide open, and that he is in no rush to make a decision. Sounds like Ethan Hampton has been taking the vast majority of first-team reps at quarterback. Hampton appeared in 4 games last season, threw for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns with 2 interceptions, but he will be challenged, it sounds like, by Arkansas Pine Bluff transfer Jalen Macon. Also, redshirt freshman Josh Holst and JUCO transfer Kenny Luth are in the mix. Redshirt sophomore Nevin Krimascoli, who got a good bit of action in 2022, I believe, is there as well. But Macon got to see him a little bit at UAPB last season at the FCS level. They played, I think, a Friday night game and got to take a little bit of a closer look at him than I otherwise would have. He's listed at 6'6", 100 or over 200 pounds, physically imposing but also athletic quarterback. Curious to see if he's able to push Hampton. There was a note later this week, Macon taking most of the number 2 reps behind Hampton. 6'5", 230 is how he is listed. So, even if Hampton is going to be taking the starting duties, will Macon perhaps be a goal line option, short yardage option, where there'll be a role for him? I'm curious to see how that all shakes out. But of course, the running game and the running back position for NIU is the deepest position on the roster. Gavin Williams has been taking a lot of reps this year. He is, so far this spring, according to reports, he is the backup to Ontario Brown, who's been, sounds like, not maybe limited, but they've been trying to make sure he doesn't take a too heavy of a workload this spring. But Brown last year, over 200 carries, nearly 1,300 yards, averaged over 6 yards per attempt, had 10 touchdowns on the ground. Sounds like Brown, they've been working with him, his receiving duties out of the backfield. Not a very productive receiver. Did have 12 catches last year, but 52 yards and 1 touchdown for Brown. Gavin Williams, nearly 500 yards rushing last season and 3 touchdowns. He was a little bit more involved in the passing attack, had 24 catches, 147 yards without a touchdown. But top 2 wide receivers are back for NIU. Traven Randolph, former All-MAC performer, missed the 2022 season due to injury last year, had 51 catches on 81 targets, 533 yards, just 2 touchdowns. Grayson Barnes had 5 receiving touchdowns, which led the team average 18.3 yards per catch, 422 yards on 23 catches. Kenji Lewis, a transfer coming in from the FCS level, is expected to be a factor as well. And then Kayshawn Pipkin was taking some first-team reps at wide receiver also early in spring practice. The official NIU website had some notes, including an interview with Thomas Hammock, who is going into his 6th season at his alma mater. Led NIU to the MAC championship a couple of years ago. Hammock said here, according to that official site, "I like where we are. The guys are really competing. We've had intense practices every single day. Our defense is playing at a high level, really forcing our offense to execute and play physical. It's a battle, and I really love the competition. It was a long practice today." It was earlier this week. And we got a lot of reps and a lot of quality reps in. One item that came out as I was reading through this piece that I hadn't realized. There are about 100 players on the roster right now for NIU. 34 of them are designated as seniors. So, NIU, very experienced team in a conference like the MAC, where, the difference in talent is relatively small. Not going to see a whole lot of, even Toledo, which is consistently the most, talented team, the way we calculate it in the MAC. Not a huge gap there with anybody. But NIU, if you take a look at it, at the level of experience and just age, which perhaps, shows up a little bit more in the MAC than it would certainly in Power 5, Power 4 conference. But NIU is experienced, not just in terms of returning production, where the numbers look pretty good. They're 34th nationally in our adjusted returning production numbers overall. They're 89th on the offensive side of the ball, and a large part of that is the quarterback position, where Rocky Lombardi must be replaced. But they are top 10 in our adjusted defensive returning production numbers right now. 4 out of 5, leading tacklers from last season are back. They do have to replace starting linebacker Tyler Jackson, defensive tackle James Esther. Do lose a couple of impact defenders to the transfer portal, defensive back Devin Lafayette, defensive end George Gums, but just about everybody else who played significant snaps last year is back for that NIU defense. So if they get the quarterback situation figured out, even if they don't, I expect Ontario Brown and Gavin Williams to lead that offense on the ground. Expect that they'll be able to do quite a good job. 2 full-time starters return on the offensive line. 4 other players who started games are back. So feel like they're going to be in pretty good shape there. But as NIU takes another run at a MAC title, could they potentially be in the mix? I think it's possible. I mean, I'm not going to write anybody off in the MAC, quite honestly. But with Toledo having to replace so much, Miami, the defending champs, knocked off Toledo last year, a little bit less. Our very first returning production numbers look a lot better for Miami than they do currently. They're more, middle of the pack nationally. NIU is I think going to be in a spot to compete. They do have a very tough non-conference schedule. After opening up with FCS opponent Western Illinois, they take a trip to Notre Dame. They have a week off before an early MAC opener against Buffalo. That's going to be at home in DeKalb, and then a trip to NC State. So 2, top 25 type teams on the road, power conference teams in September. That's going to be tough. But, will they be 2-2 at that point and off to a 1-0 start in MAC play with that new look Buffalo team? I think that's a reasonable expectation. They'll be a favorite the following week at UMass in the first week of October. So perhaps, going to be able to take a winning record, even with that very tough non-conference schedule, into the meat of the MAC in mid-October. They play at Bowling Green, home against Toledo, and then at Ball State before the first week in November. They have an off week prior to MACtion starting up fully with those midweek games in November. At Western Michigan, November 6th, home against Akron, November 3rd, at Miami, November 19th, and then finish the season with a home date senior night against Central Michigan on Saturday, November 30th. So Northern Illinois, having to play both of the MAC title teams from last year, Toledo and Miami. I've mentioned before, I think Bowling Green is probably going to finish pretty high in our MAC preseason power rating. So having to take that trip to Bowling Green is going to be tough. Western Michigan is always a talented team as well. So, the schedule doesn't set up super well for NIU. But one of the reasons the MAC is so fun is there's really not much of a gap between the most talented team and the least talented team. And Northern Illinois, with those 34 seniors, again, assuming that quarterback position comes together, I think that they're going to be a really, really competitive team. So that is going to do it for us today and this week. Thank you for joining us. If you were here with us live, we very much appreciate it. If you're catching a replay later on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, we certainly appreciate that. Also, please do subscribe there. Please do give the video a like. We'll be back on Monday with a lot of notes from spring games at those teams that we listed off earlier in the show. And until then, if you would be so kind, give us a look at campustocanton.com. We would love to see you subscribe there for as little as $2.99 per month, or take a look at those returning production numbers that we discussed. Be on the lookout for those team profiles as well. Both of those available to our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 members at the top of the tiers there for us at campustocanton.com. So I'm Nicholas Ian Allen. Thank you so much for joining us today and this week. We will see you on Monday for Good Morning College Football.